worst movie that I saw of 2022 is Firestarter. Firestarter sucks and fails in pretty much every way possible. In fact, it sucks so much that I made an entire video about how much it sucks. So if you want to learn more about how much it sucks, then you should watch that video. However, the long and short of it is that ridiculous CGI makes this serious movie feel like a comedy, and a comedy that you're laughing at instead of with. All the acting sucks, all the cinematography sucks with way too many weird zooms and close-ups. The editing is bad, and pretty much just everything is bad about this movie. Don't watch it unless you want to laugh at it, in which case then this movie actually does work pretty good at being that. Jurassic World Dominion. I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but Jurassic World Dominion is an insult to the Jurassic Park franchise. Jurassic World Dominion asks a question in the beginning of the movie and all of its marketing: what would it be like if dinosaurs inhabited the entire world along with humans? Jurassic World Dominion is a movie that does not answer that question at all. This movie promised to be different from all the other movies, and that it wouldn't be confined to a single location, and that dinosaurs would be roaming all around the world. But we barely get to see any of that. We get to see this little dinosaur black market area, but then nothing after that. After that, the entire movie just takes place in this biosyn lab that serves the same narrative purpose as a frickin' theme park. And it doesn't help that this movie is more about locusts than it's about dinosaurs. The only potentially redeeming part is the returning actors, but even they feel like they don't really want to be there. At the same time, I don't want them to make another Jurassic World movie, but I also don't want the Jurassic Park franchise to end on this movie forever. And it doesn't even help that Jurassic World Dominion is like 30 minutes longer than it should be. This movie should have been like 1 hour and 50 minutes maximum, but it ended up being 2 hours and 30 minutes. This movie just wastes your time. It's an insult to the franchise. It does everything wrong. F. Halloween Ends is just plain weird. This is a movie that spends so much of its runtime on this weird Corey kid that it really feels like they're trying to build up this Corey guy as the next Michael Myers. And then, spoiler alert, they just kill him at the end along with Michael Myers. And yeah, it kind of does make sense that they would kill him if this is the last Halloween movie. But why would you want the last Halloween movie focused on setting up this new character? It doesn't really make any sense. This movie's only purpose is for the 20 minutes of fan service they shove in at the end, where you get to see Michael Myers killed. But other than that, this movie is just so weird with how it decided to take itself. It really feels like Halloween Kills could have been the last Halloween movie if they just duct taped the last 20 minutes of Halloween Ends onto that movie. And yeah, fan edits are already doing this. D-. Secrets of Dumbledore is an insult to the Harry Potter franchise. This movie is way more boring than a Harry Potter movie should be, and it is able to recreate exactly none of the magical feeling that the main 8 Harry Potter movies did. It's honestly baffling that this is what Warner Brothers wants to do with the Harry Potter franchise, and that they actually made a third Fantastic Beasts movie after the second one. Overall, this movie is boring, convoluted, and forgettable, and not worth your time. D-. The Woman King is a movie that is boring. It is very, very boring. And it doesn't help that throughout that boring movie, nothing of what you are seeing is even somewhat true. Despite the fact that this movie marketed itself as being based on true events, nothing besides the basic fact that there was an African tribe that had elite female warriors is even somewhat true. In fact, a lot of what this movie is showing is actually the opposite of true, as this movie tries to show the tribe as morally opposed to slavery and helping free members of a rival tribe, when in reality, the tribe this movie is about was one of the most notorious in the slave trade. And besides the inaccuracies, because I can get past inaccuracies even if you market your movie as based on true events, this movie is way too boring. There are so many scenes when just nothing happens, and the actual fight scenes are way too few and far between. I am honestly not sure what this movie was trying to go for. D. Bros is a comedy movie where I did not laugh a single time. I have to assume that this is because the people who made this movie made a gay movie about gay people with gay jokes that only gay people would understand, and then got mad when straight people didn't show up to the box office. And I feel like most of the jokes are so wrapped up in gay male millennial culture that I don't even think, say, a bisexual Zoomer would get the jokes in this movie. Or maybe I'm just stupid and couldn't get the jokes. And yeah, it doesn't help that this movie has 5 gay sex scenes in it, but they're all wearing boxers. Which makes it even funnier that Billy Eichner was trying to say that anyone who isn't homophobic should see this movie.
Sir, are you homophobic or will you be seeing Bros?
Neither.
Why?
I say don't see this movie unless you are very, very gay. D. With The Invitation, we have back-to-back PG-13 horror movies. This movie is a vampire movie that relies entirely on jump scares for its horror. And just such lame horror. Once again, weird premise with vampires that aren't actually that threatening. This movie may have had potential if it was able to go all out with the gore, but the PG-13 rating, man, it just kills this movie. I heard that it does have an unrated cut out on video on demand. However, the PG-13 version is the version that released in theaters, and I'm not gonna watch your alternate cut if the one I saw in theaters already sucked. I'm sorry, The Invitation. You're just gonna have to accept this D+ and move on with your day. Pray for the Devil is a PG-13 horror movie. That should be enough to make you not want to see it, however there's more. It has an invisible threat, which is done pretty well. However, unfortunately for this movie, Smile did that same concept way better just a month earlier, and it ends up making this movie seem redundant. And it doesn't help that the CGI in this movie is not the best. And the weirdest part about this movie is the setting, where it's this crazy nun school where they exorcise demons out of people. The whole premise just never really makes sense. This movie might have had some potential if Smile didn't exist, but unfortunately for Pray for the Devil, Smile does exist, and this is just a movie that you should skip. D+. Amsterdam is a movie where Taylor Swift gets hit by a car. That is the only good part about Amsterdam. This movie has an excellent cast with faces such as Christian Bale and Robert De Niro. However, they are so misused in this movie. This movie's story barely leaves an impact, and it's full of ridiculous things that make no sense, like how this movie takes place in the 1930s, but the climax relies on the main characters recording people in secret with a handheld camera that is able to record both video and sound. That is absolutely ridiculous and makes no sense. But if you don't mind your suspension of disbelief being shattered and want to see Taylor Swift being hit by a car, then this is the movie for you. D+. If I were to describe Thor: Love and Thunder with one word, it would be disappointing. This movie had so much potential, being the sequel to the excellent Thor Ragnarok, that essentially revived the Thor franchise, only for this movie to go ahead and pretty much kill it again. It is baffling to me that this movie has the same director as Thor Ragnarok, because it really feels like they showed someone else Thor Ragnarok and told them to create a movie that imitates that style. Because it seems like someone who is in charge saw that Thor Ragnarok had jokes in it, so this movie should have a joke in pretty much every single scene.
I was actually debating whether or not to put this in my mediocre list or my bad list, because I do think there are some good aspects to this movie. Some of the visuals are really great, and Jane's character is definitely better than the first two movies. But the sheer amount of disappointment in this movie, and the fact that this movie kind of signals the beginning of the end for the MCU, I'm gonna have to give this one a D+.
Strange World is one of the most forgettable movies I have ever seen. Initially, I put this in my mediocre list, but after thinking back to it, I realized just how little of an impact this movie made on me. Like, all the characters are forgettable, the story is so forgettable, the twist at the end kind of just makes no sense and makes for a super anticlimactic ending. And this movie overall is just so bland and generic. It feels like Disney was hoping that the gay crowd would show up just because it has a prominent gay character in it, but then they pulled out on all of the marketing after all the controversy that Lightyear had. Overall, this movie is just bland and generic and not worth your time, with or without the gay character. D+. Babylon is a movie that just screams pretentiousness. I've seen a lot of people who actually really like this movie, and I can kind of see where they're coming from. The setting of early Hollywood is pretty interesting, and some of the characters are likable, but geez, this movie just did not do it for me. This movie feels like it can substitute actual substance for senseless shock value that I can't show here because my video will get deleted. And don't get me wrong, I don't care about a tit or two in a movie, but the first 30 minutes of this movie is essentially a porno, and that's not the only scene in this movie like that. It's like they're begging people to walk out of the theater. And beyond that, it's just way too long. I would have liked this movie a lot more, maybe even put it in my good movies list, if it wasn't 3 hours and 20 minutes long. And this movie came out only a week after Avatar came out, which was also 3 hours and 20 minutes long. It's no wonder why people didn't want to immediately go see another 3-hour movie right after watching a 3-hour movie. No wonder why this bombed. This movie has serious pacing issues due to its long length, and I think a 2-hour or even a 2-hour 30-minute runtime would have gone a long way to making this movie a lot better and a lot more watchable. At the end of it all, this movie is essentially an R-rated Singing in the Rain, minus the singing. And I feel like that's a very interesting concept for a movie, but this one just botched the execution hard.
Uncharted is a weird movie. It doesn't really work as a video game adaptation, pretty much just because Tom Holland doesn't look like Nathan Drake whatsoever. The change in personality essentially makes them completely different characters. So essentially what you're left with is a action movie, and a generic action movie at that has a popular video game IP slapped on. The only way I could see someone really liking this film is if they're a big Tom Holland fan. But even then, it still has several issues, including the CGI, which can be really rough at parts. It's not completely awful, as some of the action is pretty good. Overall, kind of enjoyable time, but this is a movie I wouldn't really recommend unless you're a die-hard Uncharted fan or a die-hard Tom Holland fan. C-. Turning Red. I did not like Turning Red. I did not hate Turning Red. That's why it's in my mediocre list and not my bad list. I just didn't think this movie was up to Pixar standards. I mean, just look at the animation. It looks more like an Illumination movie than a Pixar movie. And heck, even now Illumination is making movies that look better. One of my biggest problems with the story is that it didn't really feel like it had any stakes. The only bad thing that would happen if May didn't achieve her goal would be that she wouldn't be able to go to the 4-time concert. Which, to be honest, I don't really care whether or not she gets to go to her boy band concert. And it feels like once she wasn't able to go, it was like, great, movie over. But of course, the movie wasn't over, and it kind of feels like they had to tack on a climax onto that. This movie isn't completely awful. It's just that Pixar can do much, much better. C-. I thought there was no way to go wrong with Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds, but Spirited really disappointed me. Seems like some people like this movie, but I don't know, this one just didn't fill me up with the Christmas cheer. I feel like the basic premise was a bit too convoluted for a Christmas movie, and the overall mechanics of it were kind of hard to grasp. And overall, there was just way too much death for a Christmas movie. And also, the good afternoon stuff got really tiring after a while. Once again, there are enjoyable sequences of this movie, and Ryan and Will's interactions definitely do save this movie from being bad, but this one's still gonna have to take the C-. You know those I Hate My Wife boomer comics? Well, Ticket to Paradise is essentially just an entire movie of those I Hate My Wife jokes, along with an equal amount of I Hate My Husband jokes. At least for the first half. The second half is a pretty unrealistic romance plot that doesn't really make much sense. If you want to see George Clooney and Julia Roberts make boomer humor jokes all movie, then this one's for you. But for the rest of us, I think we'll just move on. C-. Death on the Nile is an enjoyable but forgettable murder mystery film. It's definitely not awful, but it's filled with little things that keep me from enjoying it. Like all the crazy camera angles they have to shove in every 5 seconds. It just ended up distracting me from the movie. And I just feel like after a while it kinda dragged on. I have to admit I was a bit disappointed that they killed off Gal Gadot so early, but I can't really get mad at a murder mystery movie for killing people. C. Lyle Lyle Crocodile has to be the most ridiculous movie since the Bee Movie. Like, nothing makes sense. The simple fact alone that Lyle never has any speaking lines makes it so that every time Lyle opens his mouth and Shawn Mendes' voice comes out, it's an absolute gut punch and you're never prepared for it, no matter how many times it happens. And it's just so bizarre how everyone in this movie hates Lyle until they see him sing, and then they immediately love him and will do anything to protect him. So much weird with this movie, but it's almost so bad it's good. But it's not actually so bad it's good. It's more so bad it's mediocre. C. Beast is almost funny with how ridiculous it is. This one lion is literally invincible throughout the entire thing. It even gets hit with a tranquilizer dart that is specifically designed to take down lions, and it just doesn't even care. And then in the ending of the movie, Idris Elba decides to wrestle the lion with nothing but a knife. And not only does he survive, but they kill the lion, the main antagonist of the movie, off screen. Has to be the most ridiculous ending ever. This one gets a C. And by the way, by my calculations, this movie is the mediocrest mediocre movie to release in 2022. DC League of Super Pets is a fairly decent kids movie, but in the end, it's nothing special. It's not a movie that I see really anyone, not even a kid, returning to after they've already seen it. But it's still not bad. I mean, Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart have fun interactions like always. And there are some fun parts to this movie, but in the end, I have to complain about this character poster. It says, "The Bruce is loose," even though Bruce spends the entire movie locked up in a frickin' cage. Blatant false advertising. C. Black Adam is a movie that does a lot right and also a lot wrong. Black Adam, Dr. Fate, and Hawkman pretty much carry this entire movie, but all the other characters are just bland, forgettable, and don't really contribute much. And the freaking kid is the most annoying part of this movie. He has to be saved more times than Princess Peach. And after a while, you kinda just want it to end, even though it's not completely bad, as Dwayne Johnson actually does a surprisingly good job playing Black Adam, as it's finally Dwayne Johnson playing a different character after he's been playing the same character for so many movies. C. Lightyear should have been way better than it ended up being. The idea of a movie that focuses on the Buzz Lightyear IP inside of the Toy Story universe isn't a bad one, but it feels like they came up with that idea but didn't have any actual ideas for the actual movie. And while there are good parts about that movie that I did enjoy, I feel like the biggest shame is how they handled Zurg. I'm sorry, but I want evil Emperor Zurg to be an evil emperor. I don't want him to just be a weird future Buzz or whatever. And it seems like they were teasing having actual Zurg in the sequel, but there probably isn't going to be a sequel considering it did bad at the box office. Pixar really should have focused on this one movie rather than trying to set up something new. The fact that they screwed up Zurg so much means that this isn't going to be a movie that I want to return to really ever, which is really sad because right now Pixar just needs to let the Toy Story brand rest. Oh god damn it. See How They Run is a fun murder mystery movie with likable characters and an enjoyable plot. However, I found the reveal at the end to be super lame. They tried way too hard to make the murderer someone that the audience couldn't guess, and it ended up hurting the movie in the long run. Just ended up being anticlimactic because the murderer was someone you never paid attention to and never cared about, which makes this an extremely lame whodunit. C+. To be completely honest with you guys, I don't watch One Piece, so maybe I'm a bit unqualified to judge One Piece Film Red, but while it did have a lot of fun scenes in it, it felt like even this one movie had filler, where I was kind of just waiting for them to move on with the plot, and the overall mechanics of the dream world were kind of hard to wrap your brain around, but whatever. C+. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. This one's kinda sad, because while this movie isn't awful, it should have been great. Doctor Strange is a fan favorite in the MCU, so there's no reason why his movie couldn't have been amazing, and especially with Sam Raimi as a director. It felt like this movie was going to be what the MCU really needed, but then it kind of just dropped the ball in most aspects, specifically the multiverse aspect, as while I wanted a fun movie that explored a bunch of wacky universes, we ended up only really exploring two, which is extremely lame, and I don't even care if the universes didn't have fun cameos in it. I just wanted to see wacky multiverse shenanigans with this which this movie did not have. The characters are fine, and I don't care about the transitions as much as everyone on TikTok does, but this one's getting a C+, when it could have been so much better. Minions: The Rise of Gru. This movie was actually better than I thought it was going to be. I wasn't a big fan of the original Minions movie, but the Despicable Me movies with Gru are pretty fun, and I think this movie showed that it's not really much point to having a movie with minions in it unless it has Gru. If I had to complain, I would say that I wish that the minions and Gru didn't get separated for pretty much the entire movie. I feel like their interactions are worth having, and I feel like this movie didn't have enough of that. But this movie is cute, it's funny enough, and it didn't waste my time. And that's really all I could ask from a Minions movie. Plus, this movie gave everyone an excuse to break out their formal attire, so pretty fun time. C+. Alright, we're ending this video on a hot take. Nope was kinda mediocre. In my opinion, it was the best mediocre movie. Take that for what you will, but this one just didn't do it for me. There are good aspects to it. Characters and the pacing weren't great, and alright, the general message doesn't make much sense to me. I hear everyone say that it's a message about spectacle, about how we're too obsessed with taking pictures of stuff and whatnot, and that's why the crazy cinematographer guy dies while he's trying to record it and whatnot, and they're all risking their lives trying to take pictures of this thing. But the ending of this movie has them taking a picture of it, and it's portrayed as only a good thing. So is being obsessed with taking pictures of things good, or is being obsessed with taking pictures of things bad? I'm not really sure this message is as rock solid as people say it is. This movie's not bad. I am sorry, Jordan Peele fans. This one's just gonna have to take a C+.
Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is the best Marvel movie of 2022. However, this isn't really saying that much.
It avoids all of the Marvel-isms that this year's other Marvel movies fell victim to, which is good to see. However, Chadwick Boseman's absence is really felt, and this movie doesn't do anything to fill it. It really does feel like they took the script of a Black Panther 2 that did have T'Challa in it, and then just kind of replaced T'Challa with Shuri and tried to hope that it would work. And additionally, there are weird stuff like how Shuri became the Black Panther way too quickly. She doesn't want to be the Black Panther in one scene, and then 2 scenes later she's suddenly Black Panther. It's pretty obvious that they needed Shuri to be Black Panther for the climax, but they didn't really make it a gradual progression. Overall, this movie is still good, I just feel like it could have been a lot better. B-. I Want to Dance with Somebody does serve its purpose as a Whitney Houston biopic, but while watching, it does kind of make you question whether or not Whitney Houston needs a biopic. Naomi Ackie does a pretty good job playing Whitney Houston, and the musical numbers are really fun, which is to be expected. I'd say definitely go see this if you're a big Whitney Houston fan, but if you're not, then you can probably skip this one. B-. Don't Worry Darling is a movie that pleasantly surprised me. I had no expectations for this movie and I assumed it was going to be awful, but this one actually turned out to be a pretty good mystery movie. And I will admit, I didn't see the twist coming at the end, and it's a pretty decent twist. The acting from Florence Pugh and Chris Pine is great, although Harry Styles is definitely the weak point in this movie. His performance did feel a little weird, but if you want a cool mystery movie with a fun 1950s setting, then Don't Worry Darling is a pretty good choice. I recommend it. B-. The Bob's Burgers movie. This movie is pretty good, but not amazing. It feels more like a longer episode compared to something like The Simpsons movie or South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, where those felt like it really deserved the theatrical release. This one kind of just feels like a longer Bob's Burgers episode with musical numbers, which isn't a bad thing, and it's definitely a treat for Bob's Burgers fans, but it could have been better. B-. Devotion is a good movie, although I feel like it's begging to be compared to Top Gun Maverick, considering it's an airplane movie that released in 2022 that stars Glenn Powell. And in that comparison, Devotion doesn't really stand a chance. However, obviously it's not really a fair comparison because Top Gun Maverick is a fictional movie and Devotion is trying to tell a true story. And Devotion does do a good job telling that story. Jonathan Majors does a great job playing Jesse Brown, and it's definitely one of the highlights of this movie. However, it does have a few issues, like how there's some scenes that are like way too dark for whatever reason. I'd say watch this movie if you're into airplane movies and historical movies, but if you're not in love with that kind of stuff, then I'd understand skipping this one. B-. Dragon Ball Super Superhero is a movie that has the word super twice in a row, but whatever. And you know what? It's not a masterpiece of cinema, and it has several flaws in terms of its pacing, its acting, and its characters, but it does deliver what I want to see in a Dragon Ball movie, and that's fun, crazy anime fights. And it also got us a pretty good Fortnite collab, so hey, I can't complain. B. You know, I normally hate IP mishmash movies, like Ralph Breaks the Internet and the Emoji Movie and Space Jam: A New Legacy, but for whatever reason, I just don't hate Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. It has a pretty good amount of funny jokes, and it does feel like they care a lot about the IPs they're using compared to other similar movies. Maybe part of the charm comes from seeing the crazy crap that you're seeing in this movie on a actual Disney Plus film, but hey, for whatever reason, I just can't get mad at it. I understand if you hate this film, but it's a fun time. B. Avatar: The Way of the Water is a 3-hour and 12-minute movie with very pretty CGI. However, I really would have preferred a 2-hour and 30-minute movie with pretty CGI. It's good, but it really overstays its welcome, and by the end, I kinda just wanted it to be over. However, I will have to praise James Cameron on this one thing. The ending of this movie was literally Titanic. Sinking ship, check. Flooding, check. Main character dying, check. God bless you, James Cameron. You finally made Titanic 2. Bplus. Smile is actually a really great horror movie. It's probably the scariest movie that came out in 2022. It does a great job making you feel really terrified of this invisible threat that you can't see at all, but you know is going to kill your main character in just a few days. I wish it didn't rely on jump scares as much as it did, but if you're a horror fan, really make sure you check out Smile. Although if you don't like scary movies, then you should probably sit this one out. Bplus. X is a pretty standard slasher movie that is made a lot better by the existence of its prequel that I will talk about later in this video. All of the actors do a great job, especially Mia Goth and Jenna Ortega, and it does the 1970s aesthetic very well. Personally, I would recommend watching this movie after Pearl, and I feel like watching the movies in this order just makes more sense. Definitely check this one out if you like slasher movies. Bplus. Perhaps I'm biased because I'm a Sonic fan, but Sonic 2 was pretty good fun. Jim Carrey is amazing like always and really stole the show. Knuckles was also really great to see on screen, and Tails was there too. I love the attention to detail of having all of the great Sonic references hidden throughout the movie, and it definitely did feel like they cared about the source material. My biggest complaint is still with the human characters. However, I feel like they were still handled better in this movie than they were in the first movie. If you're a Sonic fan, definitely make sure you watch this movie, although you probably already had. If you're not a Sonic fan, then this one probably isn't for you. But whatever, Bplus. The Whale is a very interesting movie. On one hand, it's very hard to watch. It's so hard to watch that immediately after watching it, I wanted to put it in my bad movies list. But after reflecting on it, realized how much of an impact it made on me. The characters are really compelling and extremely well acted, to the point that I am very glad this movie got an Oscar for Best Actor. This one is definitely a tough watch, and it is not for everyone. But if you know what you're getting into, The Whale can be a very interesting and powerful movie that sticks with you for a good while. Bplus. Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. I'm gonna be honest, I'm kind of conflicted on this movie. On one hand, it's hard to overstate the sheer amount of effort that went into making this movie. The stop motion is honestly beautiful, and this movie is just super impressive. However, Pinocchio himself is just really annoying, and there's also the fact that this movie is way more depressing than it needs to be. However, this movie is still very good. However, I will say the animation and the fact that it is stop motion kind of carries other aspects of this movie. Bplus. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. I'll admit, I'm conflicted on this movie. I'll say right now that I don't love it as much as everyone else does. However, I do agree that it is a very good movie. The visual effects and editing and overall visual style, to me, is definitely the most impressive part. I will say I do find the story a little weird. Like, there's just such a disconnect between the normal version of Joy and the multiverse version of Joy that they don't even feel like the same characters at all, which feels a little weird to me. And the whole mechanics of the multiverse that it's set up didn't really make that much sense to me. Maybe I'm just dumb and can't watch movies. However, this movie has a bunch of talent and heart and soul that I really do appreciate. So while I don't think it's a masterpiece, I will still say it is a very good movie, even if I don't love it as much as everyone else did. A-. The Fable Men is a movie that Steven Spielberg did a great job with in pretty much all aspects, but I still have my complaints. My biggest complaint is that the overall story wouldn't really be interesting at all if it wasn't about Steven Spielberg. So it kind of just makes me wish that they dropped the whole Sammy Fableman thing and just called him Steven Spielberg, so we didn't have to witness everything through a metaphor. And one thing I did find weird is that this movie has two sides, I'd say. The family drama side and the movie making side. However, pretty much all of the conflict in the movie, with a few exceptions, lies in the family drama side. The movie making side is pretty much smooth sailing, where Sammy has very few conflicts in becoming a filmmaker, up until the very end, where he graduates high school and he's trying to send a bunch of letters to different TV studios to get a job. However, it just has a 1-year time skip, so you don't get to see any of that. However, I'm just nitpicking. This is still a great movie that tells the story of Steven Spielberg's life. A-. The Black Phone is a really great horror movie. It might not be as scary as Smile, but it makes up for it in how well it executes its premise. The child acting in this movie is among the best I've ever seen, and Ethan Hawke does a great job playing the grabber. He feels really menacing, and I feel like it really elevated this movie. I'm honestly super impressed in how good this movie ended up being, considering the low quality of Blumhouse's previous film. A-. The Bad Guys is a really fun parody of heist movies like Ocean's 11, and it's able to replicate that unique style in a fun way. The characters are good, the plot's pretty fun, and the animation style is really great, giving the movie a unique comic book feel. If you like heist movies or great animation, make sure you see The Bad Guys. A. Pearl is a really great movie that's almost Joker-esque in the way it shows its main character's transformation from a normal person to a cold-blooded killer. Knowing Pearl's backstory really improves your experience watching X, and her story alone is really entertaining and worth a watch. Additionally, the visual style in this movie is really striking, with a beautiful Technicolor color palette that really makes this movie stand out among the others. Definitely check this one out. A. Violent Night is a Christmas movie for people who list Die Hard as their favorite Christmas movie, and it executes that premise very well. David Harbour does an amazing job as Santa Claus, and all the other characters are pretty fun to watch too. It's arguably the most bloody movie that came out last year, and it's honestly hilarious that that's coming from a Christmas movie. I also like how it's able to separate itself from other similar action movies by having the main character never use a gun, and having him use a sledgehammer to kill all his enemies definitely makes this one a unique and fun treat for any action movie fan. A. Elvis does an amazing job telling the story of Elvis's career and his working relationship with Colonel Tom Parker. Its most impressive part is how it's able to visually convey the different decades, giving it a really unique visual style. Austin Butler does an amazing job playing Elvis, and it's one of the best performances of the year. I'd honestly argue that you don't even need to be a fan of Elvis's music to enjoy this movie. Baz Luhrmann continues to do a great job with Elvis. Make sure you go see this one. A. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is a honestly hilarious comedy movie. Just the general premise of having Nicolas Cage play Nick Cage is brilliant, and the movie executes this perfectly. Both Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal are hilarious, and they make an amazing duo. And honestly, there's not much to say besides this movie's really funny, go see it. A. Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. God damn it, Rian Johnson. After The Last Jedi, I wanted to hop on the Rian Johnson hate train and never get off. But with Knives Out and Glass Onion, Rian Johnson has proved that yes, he is an excellent director, he just sucks at Star Wars. Glass Onion has a captivating story, great characters, great acting, and excellent visuals throughout the entire thing. And Glass Onion is able to pull off an excellent flex by making a whodunit movie, making the whodunit extremely obvious, and still making it wildly entertaining to watch. Glass Onion is well worth the watch, and I'd argue that you don't even need to see Knives Out before. A+. I wasn't expecting to like a sequel to Puss in Boots 2011 as much as I did, but by God, DreamWorks pulled it off. The animation in this one is amazing, and all of the characters were hilarious and fun to watch, and I love to see the great parodies on classic fairy tales. I mean, having Goldilocks and the Three Bears be a crime family, genius. And that's not even to mention that this movie has two other amazing antagonists in the form of Death and Big Jack Horner. This movie is just simply amazing, and you've probably already seen it, but if you haven't, go see it now. It's worth your time. A+. Bullet Train is awesome. Great acting, amazing visuals, great action scenes, and amazing editing make Bullet Train a treat to watch from start to finish, which makes its 54% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes extremely baffling to me. Brad Pitt is great, Tangerine and Lemon are great, and honestly, the Thomas the Train jokes never get old. And honestly, the ensemble cast is great, because when a character is introduced, you never know if they're going to become a main part of the movie or die a gruesome death, and it really keeps you guessing the entire way through. Go see this movie if you haven't already. It is worth your time, and it's amazing. A+. The Batman is by far the best comic book movie in 2022, and it wasn't even close. It's 3 hours long, but it pulls off that runtime amazingly, and it's never boring. Robert Pattinson does an amazing job as Batman. Plus, the Penguin and especially the Riddler are amazing villains. And it's great to see Batman's detective side in a movie. It's not even to mention its amazing visual style and excellent score. I know that you've already seen this movie, but if you somehow haven't, please go see it now. A+. And finally, the best movie of 2022 is Top Gun Maverick. Top Gun Maverick is magical. Not only is it a modern sequel to an old movie that's good, it's a modern sequel to an old movie that's better than the original. And to be honest, I was already a pretty big fan of the original Top Gun. I know not everyone is, but I really like it, okay? Tom Cruise continues to prove to be an amazing actor, and the rest of the cast is really fun to watch as well. It's not even mentioning the best part of this movie, the dogfights. I mean, it's great. And this movie does a great job showing off the power of IMAX cameras. This movie's flying scenes are so effective that it really makes you feel like you're flying with them. I'm not even gonna say please go see this movie, because you've already seen this movie. It's great. A+.